All right. Welcome, everybody, to our Facebook Live event. And we've got special guest Steve Thompson joining me and Adam today. Steve, thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, great to be here. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
All right. Let's get right into it. Our topic today, you're going to find out very soon from the first question, is Steve, what is the biggest stumbling block you find with most PT owners as you start working with them and coaching them?
Great question. And I think it's one that absolutely needs to be clarified. And that is that most owners don't have a vision. They don't have clarity about where they want to go. The only way I can equate it is like, let's say you're going to take a trip. And if you don't know where you're going, you're going to kind of spin in circles.
Well, we talked about this a little bit before we pushed record and went live on Facebook, but people approach us, especially as to get answers in terms of where do I find new patients? Where do I find physical therapists in this day and age? How do I improve my front office collections or my billing collections? What EMR program should I use? And a lot of that matters. Usually stumps them is when we come back and say, hey, so where do you want to go with this? What's your vision? Well, I want to have some clinics and I want to do this but why? I mean, what's your greater vision for this? What do you envision for your life? What would be your ideal scene? And that makes people pause. And it's odd, right? That they haven't taken the time. And I'm not being judgmental because I'm in that space and I find myself in that space plenty of times. They don't have that clarity of vision to work from.
Very true. And I think maybe if we look at it and say they may have had a vision early on because they wanted to start a practice. They wanted to open up a practice. So, hey, okay, vision number one created. Now I'm here, I'm in my vision. Now what? It's like a vision can be continually be changed, modified, added to, reduced, updated. And I think that's probably where I see most of the people get stuck is they kind of make the gains in their business, but then they level out and then they don't know what to do. Or, like a PT has said, I want to open up my practice, and they do it. And all of a sudden, 3 or 4 years later, they're surrounded by staff and patients. And they're like, wait a minute, how did I get here? What am I doing now? I want my staff to work together. I want to have more new patients, like you said. And if you don't know where you're going, you're going to spin in circles and you're going to be frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Adam, as you've grown your practice, have you felt like a lack of clarity in regards to your vision has limited you? Or in other words, do you find that it's been easier to progress once you've had clarity of vision?
Yeah, it gets more exciting. That's kind of what I feel. I'm a feeler, you know what I mean? I usually like to feel things when things are off. And lack of vision to me feels very unappealing. It feels boring. It feels mundane. I almost feel like a sense of agitation with kind of like my situation and like my surrounding. I'm just not really happy, maybe a little grumpy, right? And then it's like this spark. I'm sure we've all had it, like when we get on a coaching call and somebody can help you like get clear on like what you really want. They have that little window of clarity, and it's like you get this refreshing, new, exciting sense of direction. That's how I experience whenever vision starts to reveal itself, right? And then I think the superpower after that is like helping your team get aligned with that, right? Like helping your team understand what you're seeing and what you're feeling and what you're excited about. That's kind of like, I guess maybe like a tier 2 of how to use vision.
Well, Steve, what do you find keeps people from gaining that clarity or updating the vision? What keeps them from getting that?
I think life in their practice, they get busy. I think there's a couple other barriers that, there's limited thinking, limited beliefs that they might have, like, oh, I can't grow this. Or they become the jack of all trades where they have to do everything and I'm the only one who can do it. And they box themselves in. Not in thinking that, I have to be the one who cleans the bathrooms and I have to be the one, they basically make themselves irreplaceable. And they don't leave themselves space to be able to actually sit down and create a vision. Adam, one thing I loved you said is that, a vision creates alignment. in the business, not only in what the directions that you're going and the decisions that you're making, but it's going to create alignment with your staff. It's also going to build your culture. It's going to create teamwork. And those are other things that you always hear clients want or owners want, is like, I want my team to work for me. I want everybody to get on the same page. I want a better culture. Well, if you don't have a vision, what are we following? And so creating that vision and sharing it. See, that's another thing too, is I think sometimes owners have a vision, they just haven't shared it. They have an idea, but maybe there's a restriction in themselves, like, oh boy, I don't want to, let's tell them that I want to grow to 5 clinics because that'll, quote, sound greedy. Or there's those limiting beliefs of like, oh, I have big dreams, but I don't want to share it because someone might pick it apart.
I think there's a lot of that. That's part of it as well. I like that you use the word greedy. The word that comes to mind also is a fear that they'll look like they're being selfish. Yeah. Because, and you've experienced this plenty of times. I experienced it personally, Adam as well. Especially for those owners who are still treating patients quite a bit in their practices. If their ideal scene is to not be treating as much and they pull out of treatment either to part-time or seeing no patients at all and anywhere in between, that them not seeing patients is going to be looked at like, well, what are you doing with your time? That they're going to be judged by their team. Even though that might be their vision. I mean, this might be an updated version of their vision, or they might recognize in order to achieve a certain vision, I'm going to have to sacrifice patient care. Yeah. And in doing so, that might make me look bad to my team. Yeah. And so immediately they squash their visions instead of thinking what the possibilities might be, or how can I overcome that hurdle to achieve my vision, right? And so I see that their go-to, their reflexive action is to just keep doing the status quo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And immediately that's when, and Adam brought it up, that's when they feel stuck.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They feel stuck because they've limited their vision, because they're unwilling to open up the possibilities that it is possible, it is completely possible to have this expanded vision where you're not treating and your team is not going to be upset about it. It's definitely possible, right? And they have to get over it. And that's where a lot of coaching, therapy, counseling, you name it, whatever it takes to get over that psychological roadblock happens, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you experienced it, Adam, you experienced it as well, right?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what if that wasn't true? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like what if that's all just a story you're telling yourself and none of that's true? It's like, whoa, what if? I always think a really good question that I like to ask is, what do you want? Because as owners, we're so like self-sacrificing when we're running our business, and like we just like give ourselves to our patients and we give all of our time away, we give all of our money away, we give all of our energy away. And sometimes they solve all their problems by giving themselves to the problem, right? And it depletes them. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, I hear you like identifying all these problems, which is great. What do you want? Like, what do you really want to happen? Like, what would be the ideal scene? And for whatever reason, like that question helps me switch out of that, like that negative mindset of like solving problems, limitations, there's a ceiling, everybody's out to get me type of mentality. And then I step into more of like possibility, dreaming, what if I could triple the size of this clinic? What if I could open 5 locations? What if? And like, I feel like if we can get owners more into that mindset more often, then things typically move a lot better.
I was going to say, what kind of questions do you ask owners to inspire that vision or help them create that vision?
For me, I always ask, what do you want?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I always ask, I always like to say something like, here's an idea. What if you just let the person you hired do it? Something like that. And then it's like you hear a light bulb go off. Mm-hmm. What kind of possibility would that give you? Yeah. Like if you were able to get rid of that, what kind of opportunities would that allow you to have? That gets them down that road of like, what's possible, right? Those are some of the questions. I don't know. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things you said in there really, really hit something. That's one is that I don't know if owners never necessarily give themselves permission to dream or permission to even put it out there. Like, well, maybe I don't want a treat, but yet they don't feel like they have a permission, like Nathan, like you said, to step away because they think their staff is going to tell them, oh, well, where are you doing? What do you're sitting at home. And Adam, I like the what if part and the question of what do you want? I owned a practice for 22 years. I've been a PT for 28. The toughest question for me to answer was, what do I want? Because like Adam said, we give so much that we're so focused on what everybody else wants. And especially now in the days of like staff turnover and, all the work-life balance issues that people are talking about, it's like we're trying to put everybody ahead of ourselves. And I think that's a really nice thing about a vision is that probably one of the first times you actually get to say, this is what I want. Some things that I like to do with clients is kind of take them on a time capsule journey and say, hey, let's look ahead 6 months from now. Like here we are in, almost October. Let's say January 1st, we're on a call. What's happened? What do you want to be on January 1? Or take them a year in advance and say, we're now talking a year. What's happened in the past year that when you look back, you're so happy about that either personally or professionally that, you know what, you're now in a different place. So kind of taking them into the future and then just let them kind of play and turn it around and define what's changed, what's different. You start to get into, because if you have a tough time answering the question, what do you want? Take them ahead of time in a time machine and just say, what does it look like now? And just dream. And then you capture some vision ideas there.
Yeah, and I think that's a hard question to answer for some people. I know I've had issues with that in the past, especially after selling my PT clinics. Like, what do I want now? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then that hesitation comes up. Well, you know what? I want to make more money. I want to do more things, and that's why maybe the negative voice inside my head starts telling me, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's asking too much. You shouldn't bother that too. Or you're being greedy. Come on. Wanting to make $1 million a year is just crazy." But what you find out is as you present that vision to a coach and friends and other people, more often than not, they're actually supportive and excited, and they want to do more with you and they want to help you. And as you share that, then other opportunities come across your path is what I've noticed.
Yeah. Because I think we want to grow. We, as business owners, we want to grow. We want our practice to grow. We want to do new programs and everything. So does everybody else in our practice. And we're kind of doing the same things over and over. Does that relate to some of our staff turnover, that we're not giving people opportunity to grow? We're not giving people opportunity to help us because we get that like fierce warrior, I got to do this all myself. And then you wonder why your staff keeps turning over because you've never let them help you. You've never let them grow, because most of the time they're going off and opening up their own practice, or they're going on to be a clinic director somewhere. And then I think you brought up a great point. Is like when you sold your practice, it's that identity shift. And I think that's another major thing for some owners is, wow, if I have to step into being an owner, what does that look like? So I'm not sure I'm going to go back and treat. They revert back to what they know. I always love to ask owners a question. So when you go to a party, how do you introduce yourself? 9 times out of 10, they say, I'm a physical therapist, instead of, I'm a PT practice owner. So it's getting clear in that identity of who you are. And that may be a limiting belief to why people don't do a vision either, because they never really define what it is. What is an owner? What does it mean to be an owner?
To their point, they've never been trained on being an owner. They don't know what running a business actually looks like. What do you do with your admin time? So that vision, I mean, that is their role. They like I like to say, once you open a clinic, you're no longer a physical therapist. You're a business owner who happens to have a physical therapy clinic, and you're a PT within that, right? And so they don't take on that ownership mantle until later on down the road. And it's usually because they've been compelled in one way or another to figure out that, oh, that's right, I own the business and it all ends with me. Yeah. But that vision is what I'm saying is obscured out of naivety, ignorance, lack of training. Yeah, we didn't have any training in any of this.
Exactly.
What does that look like to be a real business owner? And I'm not treating patients, which I've spent the last couple of decades building my entire life up to be to treat patients. Now you're telling me I have to identity shift and capture a new persona essentially and train on what it's like to be a business owner. Yeah. That can definitely obscure the vision. And when there's confusion, there's paralysis.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So when they're confused about what to do next, then they're not going to do anything. And that's why it's so important to have an outside source, whether it's a mentor, coach, consultant, therapist, or a great spouse that can lead you down that path to say, well, actually, you're not a therapist anymore. You're a business owner, and you probably need to clarify the vision around that.
And to hold them accountable to that. Like once they finally make that commitment to it, you guys probably have heard your clients say, I got to get a squeeze in these extra patients. Well, are you the one who has to do it, or does your therapist have to do it? And so it's really holding them accountable to the path that they choose.
And also to speak to your point, Steve, where you talked about, if you are doing all the work in your clinic, if you're doing all the admin, if you're cleaning all the sheets and you name it, well, what do your employees see as a path for growth? Do they see a path for growth if you are always there doing all the things? There are plenty of people on your team who would probably love to take on some leadership responsibilities and grow professionally, but you could be the limiting factor. You could be there. You could, for all of the things that you're trying to do on behalf of them, you could be their stumbling block that keeps them from really progressing in their life. And you have to recognize that your job is to build the foundation for them in which to grow and get out of their way.
Exactly.
And train and teach and coach your team members. And you, as you work up the organizational chart, bring them along with you. That's when people really start, you tell me if I'm wrong, Adam, when you move up that organizational chart and you see your team members grow up in leadership with you, there's a different sense of fulfillment that comes from your company and from the ownership seat.
Yeah, it's super fun. That's when it gets super fun. My question for Steve is, we talk about owners and really defining what their vision is. And then sometimes the first question is, well, what am I going to do? Like, what am I going to do? Like, if I let somebody else do that, then what am I going to do? Right. Like there's a disconnect there. And kind of speaking to Nathan's question, I see that in my employees too, in my team. Right. So like, well, if I don't answer the phones anymore, like, what am I going to do with my time? Like, what am I going to do? Right. And I also see it a lot more prevalent in owners who've kind of figured it out, who are like eclipsing that $1 million a year mark, and they're thinking about going to 3 clinics. And they're like, well, if I'm not doing XYZ, what am I? Like, I really feel like you have to first establish, like, what are you doing on that org board first? Right? Yeah. And if you can get really clear on what you're doing, then it helps me understand like the things that I can delegate. Right. And I think that there's sometimes that's a disconnect where people don't really know what action to take towards their vision if they have one, because they haven't envisioned themselves sitting in that role yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Cause I mean, a lot of times they hold on to things because no one else would want to do it. That's a low job. And so I'll just keep doing it. I'll keep doing the laundry or whatever it is that they want, that they're doing. And, Adam, to your point is like, to go to like 3 million or 3 clinics is what would you have to do to be able to manage that? And where do you show up in your greatest value to your company? Is it being the one who does the laundry, or is it the person who's out there marketing, making the connections to the doctors? So how do you show up best for the practice? And what things, it may start with what things don't you like to do in your day? Start there. Delegate off the stuff you don't like to do. Then delegate the stuff that probably you could have a tech or, a $15, $20 an hour person do. And really stay in your highest level, because as a practice owner, you're the visionary. You're the leader. You have to keep creating. We've all seen like the rate of change in practices is almost accelerating. And we have to almost kind of keep revisiting the vision and revisiting the direction that we're going, because something may come up, an insurer may change policy. We have to be able to have the freedom to step back and be able to look like, oh, I see this coming. We need to steer this direction. We need to go and create a cash, program to help offset this. If you're thick into the treatment, you won't be able to do it. And 2-3 years down the road, you're gonna be like, why is my revenue down? Well, we need to have the eyes on it. You need to have your dashboard. You need to be able to see what's going on in the practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love what you said about doing that simple exercise of what brings you energy and what doesn't bring you energy, right? And what can you do to offload all of those other things that don't bring you energy? Because I think as you go through that exercise, as anyone listening goes through that exercise, your vision seems to become clearer just by doing that. If you don't have a clear idea of what your vision looks like, maybe going through that exercise could create that vision for you in terms of your responsibilities, what your ideal day might look like. And well, man, if a lot of what you're doing is, man, if you love marketing, well, guess what? You need to offload all your other stuff so you can just focus on marketing.
Yeah.
Eventually get an assistant underneath you. And if that idea just fills you with so much excitement and joy, I guess there are some people out there that like doing that. It's not me, but once I found, that's a perfect example though, is like, I didn't want to do any of the marketing. And when I found out there was someone on my team that actually wanted to do that stuff, number one, I couldn't believe that someone could want to do that stuff.
Exactly.
When I found that they could, that completely changed my vision. Like, whoa, I mean, I can still run a clinic. You're going to do the marketing, and there's going to be this consistent marketing effort being done. Instead of me doing it, someone else is doing it that's excited about it and probably will do better at it because I'm not excited about it. That energy is going to be better, yada, yada, yada. All of a sudden my vision changed. All of a sudden my vision was clearer as though what I want to do next. And now all these other possibilities came to play, right? And I love that you brought up that exercise, Steve, because it feels like it could bring some clarity to someone who's questioning what their vision looks like.
And I love what you just said, because it made me think kind of in line with what Adam was saying a little bit ago. Like, probably what happens in their mind is that if they say, well, I want to go to 3 clinics. Well, I'm already doing so many things I don't like to do. And we'll multiply that by 3.
Right.
Now I'm doing it 3 times as much.
Right.
Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stay just as I am. And the phrase that popped into my head when you were talking, Nathan, was one man's garbage is another man's gold. There are things that you don't like to do, but there's probably somebody on your staff who would love to do that, would love to organize, would love to, keep it clean. There are some people, God bless them. They love to keep things tidy and clean and organized. Great. Give them the chance to do that, and they're fulfilled. Now they're a happy contributing member of the team. Versus if they're waiting for you to go clean it, when if it's not something you like to do, then they're gonna start grumbling like, well, this place is kind of dirty or
right.
So it's, again, permission, right? It comes back to permission and the ability to allow ourselves to say yes or no to what we want to do.
Yeah, I think one of the other beauties of having a vision is it allows you to also use that as a filtering system to say, because plenty of opportunities are going to come before physical therapists, especially in terms of cash pay opportunities, service that they're going to provide that are outside of direct patient care. And having a clear vision then allows them to say yes and no quicker, I would assume.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because even though such and such might be a great opportunity, could be a great investment, could make you more money, wonderful ROI, does it fall in line with our vision? Does it fall in line with our values? Yeah. Right? Is this going to get us further along where we want to go? Because like you said, you couldn't be bringing on cash pay services. Number one, that you never considered. Number two, that on a clear day, you would have said no to in the first place.
Yeah.
And so some of the benefits of getting clear on that is, okay, am I open to all services, right? And depending on the clarity and the largeness of your vision, then you can make filtering decisions. Like, Adam, did you ever consider beforehand that you would have pediatrics or pediatrics and speech on your team, right? But once that was presented to you, you either captured that vision and went with it. There had to be a place where that could fit within the greater vision, right? And I'm assuming you experienced some of that.
Of course. Yeah, I think that the clearer that I get, the clearer my team gets, and the more excited my team gets. But yeah, I know, Steve, you did mention, there are times when curveballs come, right? Insurances do things, or somebody quits, and now you got to jump back into treatment. And right, like I had somebody send me a DM not too long ago. Somebody quit. Her vision is to step out of treatment, and now she's having to decide, like, do I jump into treatment, and do I go against what I really want long term, or what do I do here? So my question is, what is your filter? Like, how do you answer that question? Like, is it okay to temporarily step out of line and go against your true north? Or how do you solve that problem?
And I think it really fits in with this topic of vision. Like, if you know that you want to get to a certain place, you'll create the conditions that you're willing to accept. You'll create the condition like, okay, I'll step back into treatment, but it's only for a finite period of time because I know I need to focus on the other things. It becomes a matter of choice at that point, right? When you're at choice is when you feel the most control. If someone should, it's like, oh shoot, I have to go back and treat. Versus, you know what, I get to go back and treat, and I'm going to do it for X period of time. And I'm going to, get somebody started on recruiting, pull somebody in to help me while I'm done. But I'm going to be stepping out. And you tell your staff, this is going to be temporary. This is going to be a short term.
Right.
Or you look at your staff and say, well, maybe they're not 100% busy. I'm going to lean on them. I'll be the backstop.
Right.
And if your team is working together and someone leaves, if your team is really united around where you want to go, they'll recognize that you're being pulled off track, and they'll say, let me step up and help.
One of Tim Ferriss's most famous TED Talks is about fear setting. And I think, to your point, Steve, maybe part B of setting up a vision is, okay, what happens if things go sideways? What happens if things go wrong? What am I going to do about it? How am I going to respond? And it's a worthwhile exercise, right? And that is to say, okay, my ideal vision includes me not treating patients anymore. And one thing that's helped me in the past, you guys might have used it as well, is the impact filter from CBT Coach. I love that. It's just a one-page thing. And as I'm establishing it asks for clarity. Like, what does success of this project look like? Right? And it gives you 5 or 6. You have to answer, if this is going to be successful, these things have to happen. These things have to be in place. What are the effects if I don't make this move? Yada, yada, yada. But it helped me clarify some vision in working with Adam and working with another physical therapist in my diagnostics business. Is like, okay, if we're going to work together on this is what I need to see on my end. Right? So we're clear. That in and of itself could then translate into, okay, to Adam's example, if someone quits, am I an option? Yes or no? If I am, then here are my parameters. If I'm not, what's my plan B? What are we going to do in that situation? If you're leaning on me to be the PRN physical therapist, but I'm not willing to treat patients, well, then you're in a pickle. Better figure it out. And let's figure that out. And let's figure that out ahead of time, right? So that we can keep that vision clean. It's important to do a little bit of work. I mean, you create the vision, then you kind of work backwards, right? how to make sure, number one, it's going to happen because we're going to set goals around it. And then also, okay, what if things go sideways? We need to have some ideas of what to do.
Yeah. Like you said, it creates the parameters from which you're going to make decisions. Plan A is this plan. Plan B is this one. And it gets you to think ahead. So you're not surprised when something comes up versus you don't make a plan. Somebody quits. Oh no, now you're scrambling and you're kind of floundering. And then 6 months later, you're like, wait, where am I again? What are we supposed to be doing?
Mm-hmm.
So, I love what you said is like that impact filter. How, what's important about this? What's important about me staying out of treatment if that's the choice? It also really puts someone at their control. Like I get to choose what I want to do here instead of being drug into something. Some people might say, well, I had to go back in. Okay, did you?
Right.
Is a good challenging
Did
question.
you have to?
Did you have to? Or did you choose to? Well, you chose to. Either way, you're making a choice.
Uh-huh.
So, I think that's the beauty of having that vision to be able to say, this is where we're going. Because, to your point, if it is like, sometimes when they get drugged back into treatment, they get so panicked that they just then hire someone with a license and a pulse. And now you start to really corrupt the culture because you were trying to rescue yourself to get out. If you have plan A, I'm going to step in for a period of time. We're going to find somebody, and you make good choices that way, choices that support the vision. And oftentimes, it's a mindset thing, right? It's when someone leaves, is it catastrophic or is it actually a chance to upgrade?
Right.
And this is to both you, Steve, and Adam. Once you helped a PT owner client establish the vision, don't you find that your abilities as a coach become a little bit easier? And also, don't you find that their next steps and their 6 and 12 month goals become pretty easy to figure out? Because there's many times where people feel stuck, like they don't know what to work on next, right? But if we can get clear on the vision, then the next steps and the goals for the next 6 to 12 months start falling into place. And now we've got priorities. And that feeling of being stuck can fairly easily be overcome.
Yeah. I say 100%. I literally, I was reading your mind. I was like, you almost become irrelevant after they get that little glimpse, I always tell everybody I work with, I'm not the hero, you are. You have all the answers. So yeah, I think vision does solve a lot of problems for you. The other thing that I notice is, vision is kind of like your ability to see into the future, right? And in the beginning, when we're not very good at that, we can't really see. It's like, we're just like day by day, right? And then once something happens, once we kind of figure it out, then we can kind of start seeing like week by week, right? And then we start seeing month by month, and then it's quarter by quarter, year by year, right? So like our ability to zoom further and further out gets greater and greater. And I'm not so sure why that happens, but I guess it's just practice. But I don't know, Steve, I would love to hear your thoughts on like why that happened. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, my experience with that is that, when someone can only see till tomorrow, because they're so far down into the weeds or the muck of the practice that they can't lift their head up to actually see above water. And so they're problem solving. They're fighting each fire. As you start to create what I heard was space. You create the space to be able to see into next week, into next month. What I heard and then what I wanted to say was like, what? The problem is a lot of times when business owners make a vision, they often make it in the clinic. They spend their time, I'm going to go in my back office, I'm going to create my vision. Well, they're in the thick of it right there. They're only going to make a limited vision.
So you're the phone ring in the background. It's
Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. Can someone pick that up by the second ring, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So, what? I encourage people to create space, get out, get away, and to be able to actually lift your head up and actually look at your practice to see what you need to do. Because, I think the difference between going from day to day kind of problem solving is that's really what it is. You're just putting out fires versus that long-term, creating that long-term vision. You're now sort of become like the air traffic controller. You're now perched up in the top looking down and directing traffic versus being in the traffic.
Yeah. How often do you guys find yourselves referencing either your personal visions or with your clients referencing the visions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to do a 30 day touch points, at least every 30 days, but I think it's a little bit more in depth every 90 days. Right. So like the way that I typically do is we'll set an annual strategic plan, which is kind of the annual, and that plan is a little bit, it's depending on how many times you've done that, it gets more and more clear each time you do it. Like the first time you do it, it might just be written with crayons and it might be super off base. But then every quarter we touch back and we reference the annual plan and we make sure that we're on track. And then we get really clear for the 90-day quarter. And then every month we get really, really clear that we're on track with the 90-day plan. Right. And it really all starts with the annual strategic plan. But my experience is that if you can get really, really clear and spend like a whole day building out that annual plan, then your month to month isn't so chaotic, right? You're going to have minor shifts, but you get 80% of the base stable and you get clear and your team gets on the same page. The problem that we get is when we don't get clear on that annual plan, and then we're just bouncing back and forth. Every month we get the shiny object syndrome. We're chasing this thing, we're chasing that thing. We'll do marketing, then we'll do recruiting, and then we'll do hiring, and then we just like the dog chasing our tail, we're just spinning around in circles. So
I think like what Nathan said, is like, reverse engineer, create the vision, and then, okay, what do I want to accomplish in the next 90 days that will reinforce that vision? So, take a smaller chunk and what can I accomplish in 3 months versus a year? Because sometimes people can't focus for longer than, a couple months, nor can we predict what's going to happen. A staff person might leave. And so if we work in those smaller containers in like 90 days and then even 30 days and even a week, how does each one of those stack up and compare to the overall vision? I think it helps you stay on track and prevents you from going off the off ramp onto another highway where all of a sudden now you're wondering like, how did I get here? Because if I want to stay on this interstate, I know I'm not going to take the wrong exit, kind of a thing.
So to get into the weeds a little bit, Adam, do you find yourself revisiting the vision and the priorities with your leadership team on a quarterly basis then essentially, or even more often, and then doing that annual strategic planning as well?
Yes. Yeah. Quarterly with the team, with the leadership team. And, everybody kind of has their own way of doing it. And what I typically do is we pull out the org board and we see the departments. We have marketing, recruiting, finance, operations. We have everything right there. And then we have to ask ourselves, like, which one of these departments is really where we need to be focusing at for this quarter? Sometimes it's multiple, but like, where's the priority? Oh, it's in marketing. Okay, great. Let's zoom into marketing. Which one of these areas of the marketing team, right? So we can break down objectives that are specific to that marketing org board. Because if you get the org board right, like that's the ship, right? That's the ship that's like going. And so I always like to start with the org board. And then every 30 days, we submit our focus, what we call is our big three. What are our big three objectives for the 30 days? And we report on the big three from the previous month. And ideally, they align very directly with the priorities that we set in the quarterly meeting. And nice. That keeps everybody in line. That keeps everybody focused. Everybody gets excited because they're actually connected to something important. And it's like, oh, wow, we actually have a company that we're running together. And it's not just I'm treating patients all the time and I'm a part of something, right? And that takes work from the owner to actually like put that together and create that environment for your team to like work together, as opposed to just kind of throwing them in the clinic and keeping them in the dark all the time. It's no fun.
Yeah, that speaks to your capabilities as a leader, because you should be at the helm of the ship, right? Looking forward, seeing what's happening. And then on that quarterly event, look to your leadership team and like, okay, are we headed in the right direction? Right? Where did we fall off in the last 90 days? Where are we missing the point? Did we get distracted on something else that came up because of yada, yada? I think that's imperative that we get back and centered on a routine basis in order to move it in the right direction. And in that way, then we can say at the end of the year, we accomplished blank, 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 right? And I think, is it the 4DX, 4 disciplines of execution, where they talk about moving big rocks quarterly. I haven't read the book, but just a reference to it. But those who are big into that, I believe, will pick the quote unquote big rock, like you said, Adam. Marketing is our issue this month. What do we need to do with marketing in order to move us closer to the vision or achieve the goals that we established at the beginning of the year? Sticking point, if that's being an issue. Do you recommend something similar, Steve?
Yeah, one of the things that I always like to kind of share with my clients is based upon Bill Bridges' work on transitions. He's kind of like the guru who wrote things on transitions. And he said, as a leader, if you're going to create a vision, you got to realize you're creating change, right? You're creating some small little tweaks to the business. And change, people tend to get afraid of. Like they just want things to be the same. But change is a momentary decision. It's a momentary situation, whatever. It's the transition afterwards where it gets sticky. So the transition where you're having the frequent meetings and what Bill Bridges talks about is you have to talk about the 4 Ps, the purpose. Why are we doing this? What the picture? What does it look like? What does it look like when we get there? So you're really, as a visionary and as a leader, you got to paint the picture where we're going. Why are we changing this EMR? Well, because it's going to look like this on this side. Then what's the plan? And then so you can then take, okay, quarter 1, we're going to hit the marketing button here. In quarter 2, we're going to hit the finance button or whatever it is. And I think important, the 4th P is the part. Get everybody involved. Like somebody needs a job. They need responsibility. And also too, it then brings them all together to help with that. And during this, you got to listen to people because there are some people who will freak out. They're thinking, oh my gosh, will I have a job? Am I going to change? They're worried about change. Yeah. But if you just keep coming with care and compassion and reiterate the purpose and the picture, you keep them from straying. You keep them from, getting panicked like, oh my gosh, something's going to happen different.
Yeah, I think if you establish that vision in conjunction with your team, maybe even with some of their input or not, that if you lay it out as a purpose-driven mission, something that they can buy into, then as you bring up programs or things that you are changing, you can then reference back to, well, remember we talked about this is where we're going, and this is why I think this accelerates our path toward or our progress towards that greater vision. So in having that, it very much speaks to the importance of having it clear, having your vision explained and clear, having your values and your purpose clear and explained, because then you can reference back to them and say, this is why we're doing this. We're making these changes because what we were doing before didn't quite align with our values or didn't seem to, or we're adding this program because that's part of our vision. Remember, we shared that with you before. So it allows us to come back to center and remind our team, there is a reason behind it. These are our purposes. These are our whys. And this is why we're moving forward. Because a lot of times, like you said, I think people like change as long as it's happening around them. They don't want to change themselves.
Well, they don't like change when it's forced upon them.
Right. Yeah.
If they're involved in it,
we're surprised.
We're surprised. Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah, we're surprised. And that's why, again, sharing it, like if you're going to actually create a vision and then implement it, is set up your meeting and share it with your staff. It might not be a bad idea to get your managers on board first, so then they become your cheerleaders for the rest of the staff. So share your vision with your leadership team and then take it to everybody else. And I even often recommend, like when people are going to share their vision, is have an activity where they can actually offer suggestions. So they start to kind of feel that piece of it, that they're a part of it. Otherwise, they feel like, okay, God, here comes change. What's going to matter? And I think you're right. People do like change if they have choice, if they have some control in it, if they have some contribution to it.
And if it's at a rate in which they can manage,
and they know where it's going and the reason why they're going there.
I think we've all been a part of that. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. It's like I've done that.
Yeah.
So like, I had to learn that lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Steve.
And I've seen also too, like working with clients who work in the corporate world, when change is just given to you with no reason why, no plan, nothing, it really is disruptive. And so as practice owners is just encourage you that, keep sharing the purpose, keep sharing the picture of what it looks like, the plan here, this is what I need you for. And then again, when you're meetings, you always touch on, hey, here's how we're making progress. We're at this point when we thought we'd be here. And then, hey, does anybody see any roadblocks that we can't see? Because someone else might see a roadblock that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, I've been in that situation as of you guys. Like we have something changes and you say, well, why? Mm-hmm. What are we doing this for again? And then I don't find myself being 100% engaged at that point. Yeah. And if you want engagement on your team, you need to have that clarity and the conversation and the why spelled out to them, and maybe even reiterated, reminded, you name it, so that they stay engaged.
The other thing that I'll say too, like if you're going to share your vision at a meeting, might not be a bad idea to take some time and meet with everybody on staff individually, because some people won't bring up suggestions in a group. They're a little shy. So in order to make sure that everybody feels like they're a part of this, is having that connection with the leader, the owner, to say, hey, I just want to make sure that, did you hear everything? Is there any questions? It just will help bring the team together. And I mean, what a nice step towards, being an all-inclusive, supportive, and service leader, is you're engaging them.
I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking a little bit about meeting with our team and creating alignment and sharing our vision and all that fun stuff. But it doesn't feel ever, especially as a young practice owner, it feels like such a waste of time. It feels like it's unproductive. It feels like, just give me some more patients to treat, right? Mm-hmm. So like just being able to convince practice owners of just having a 1 hour meeting a week is tough, right? And then I think in general, like the larger that your company becomes, the more meetings you have, the more alignment work that you have. But I'm not so sure that it ever feels like I don't ever quite shake the unproductive feeling, right? Like whenever I block the 4 hours, 6 hours for a quarterly meeting, and I've got all these leaders, and I'm like 90,000, 100,000, 60,000, like counting all their salaries, and I'm like, and like it's still like there's still something inside of me that feels scary. Mm-hmm. How do you help people get over that? Like, what's your thoughts around that?
I think the funny thing that I always hear from people is like, hey, I always ask them, like, so do you feel like their meetings are productive? 9 times out of 10, it's no. Well, did you have an intention of what you wanted to get out of that meeting going into it? Most of the time it's like, not really. I just wanted to share. And, I think it's important for whoever is leading a meeting, to create an intention for themselves. What is it that I want to get? What do I want everybody to know here? And that will help begin to get you to focus. I think it's also clarifying what type of meeting you're going to be in. Is this a strategic meeting? Is this an execution meeting? Is this a planning meeting? Because if it's a planning meeting, do you need someone who's part of your execution team? Maybe not. So do you have the right people in the room? So I think it's a matter of getting clear on the meeting, the structure and the cadence of what you want to get out of it. Otherwise, half the people might be asleep because it doesn't pertain to them.
Right.
And do we even have an outline, or do we have an outline that's so long that would fill a 3-hour meeting when we're trying to cram it into one? And I always tell my clients too, just imagine they're only going to retain 30% of what you say.
Mm-hmm.
So think about what you want them to hear. And then follow up with it. Follow up with something in writing. So if they miss something, if they zoned out, if you're having it right after lunch and everybody's going to hit that insulin bounce, they're not going to retain anything you're saying. They're going to sit there and look at you with just a blank look on their face. So I think that there's a lot of ways to improve meetings. I think a lot of it is, 1, less is more. 2, have a plan, have an intention. What outcome do you want? Again, like Nathan was saying, what's the end in mind? Where do I want to be after this meeting? What do I want people to walk away with? That's going to help you focus on what you deliver in that meeting.
Yeah, what we found was we really used a number of things from Mastering the Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish. And he talks specifically about meeting rhythms and how the pace of your meetings can be directly correlated to the progress of your company, right? And he actually advocated, especially when you're a smaller company, to have more frequent meetings. What we found over time was that maybe the pendulum had swung a little too far. And so we took some time to recognize, okay, who is having meetings within company and how often during the month? And once we equated that, it turned into like 80 man hours of meetings every month. Like, okay, maybe we don't have to do that. And I think that's where the tendency goes initially when you think about meetings. How can we cut that back by 50 or 75% and have the same efficacy in our meetings and get the same progress? And I think that helped, number 1, Adam. And then number 2, to answer your question, sometimes the answers to that question are quantitative. So as we've had these meetings, we've seen certain productivity metrics increase. I mean, if you just pick the KPI, maybe because you've had those meetings and the particular trainings related to those meetings, production is increased because you've set goals and expectations and trained. So there is a quantitative measure that can come from those meetings, as long as they're, as Steve mentioned, they're specific to something, right? But then also qualitatively, some of these meetings were just simply to improve our culture. And so there's not a direct correlation between the amount of lost productivity to the benefits of the meeting, because there's no KPI related to it. Maybe there could be a KPI, whether it's NPR score or something like that among your employees. But there were some meetings where we had them like the quarterly town hall. We'd spend a half day, close down, and for a half day, all the employees came together from 4 different clinics to a singular clinic, and we had a town hall that included trainings and exercises and team activities and that kind of stuff. But I think part of the benefit of that quarterly town hall was a culture that got established, that where people were like, I know I could make more money elsewhere, but I'm here. I'm going to live and die at this clinic. I love it. All the things I learned, all the people that I met, all the relationships I made. And I think you have to recognize what some of the benefits of those meetings are, as long as you're clear that, okay, are our meetings effective? Are they getting the results that we wanted? And being clear and intentional about what you're looking for. And I think that's what Steve was talking to, right? Are we clear and intentional about our meetings, the agendas, and what we're addressing, and how do we want people to feel after it? What do we want, when we expect after they're done? What are the big takeaways? And laying that out ahead of time so you can have purposeful meetings.
And I think people like to know the agenda too ahead of time. If you can think ahead, and again, this is where if you create that space and you can actually have that time to run your practice, send them the agenda ahead of time so they can prepare. So then they might have questions that it helps make it more efficient and more effective in those meetings.
Great questions. This guy's pretty smart, huh?
That's right. Cool. Well, I think we're coming up on time.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us. Number 1, we didn't even ask you from the get-go. Tell us just a little bit about you and where people can find you.
Yeah. So just real brief, like I said, I've been a PT for 28 years, business owner for 22 years, recently sold my practice 2 years ago and just exited about 3 months ago. And now I'm, forming my coaching business, and it's called Steve Thompson Coaching. So it's a real complex URL, www.stevethompsoncoaching.com. it's Steve at stevethompsoncoaching.com if anyone wants to email.
Gotcha.
So
Are you on the social medias as well?
I'm on LinkedIn, but just as my name, I'm not a big social media guy, but I just kind of keeping it simple. I love to work with people who are navigating the transitions in life, because every time you bring a staff person on board, there's a change in a transition. Every time you change something, there's a change in transition. It's not like the major life changes, but if someone gets promoted to a new position, there's a change. Like you said, there's an identity shift. If an owner's stepping out of practice and into running the business, there's an identity shift. If you're selling your business, there's an identity shift. All those things need to be managed well. And I just appreciate you guys for allowing me on here to talk about something that's so fun and so important. And that creative process is so vital to our teams. They need to know where we're going. They want to know. They want to be part of something, especially this younger generation really wants to be tied to their company. If they don't, they're going to be quick to leave.
It's true. Yeah, you're seeing that more and more. Well, thanks for joining us, Steve. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Adam, nice job on setting it up. It's been great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.